Una volta un felice swagman s'accampò presso un billabong sotto l'ombra di un albero di Culabà e cantò e guardò affinché il suo Billy bollisse. Tu verrai a valzare, Matilda, con me.
The shaving of the hair, the singing of Waltzing Matilda in Italian, me, an Italian migrant, appropriating an Australian cultural sort of icon, both in terms of the song, but also in terms of Sam's appearance. A much younger woman, blonde, blue-eyed, I'm taking her hair off and I'm singing Waltzing Matilda in Italian. And that was the point we were trying to make. Is there a difference between myself and her when actually the hair comes off and there's a kind of a closing down of that gap in appearance between us? Is there a difference or isn't there? Last night was all about a question, about questioning rather than concluding anything.
Waltzing Matilda, waltzing Matilda, you'll come waltzing Matilda with me, and his ghost may be heard as you pass by that billabong. Come waltzing Matilda with me. When the roles were reversed at the end, because Dom left and I got up and I sang Waltzing Matilda, and in our own roles as artists, my role is as a musician, so my voice has a different strength. So that was interesting as well, to sing Waltzing Matilda in English from a different angle though,
Yeah.
which changed it really quickly for people, and again raised those questions. So the sort of the power dynamic switched again. I think it left people.
We wanted to produce an exhibition that looked at the experience of migration through contemporary art. So the artists that we selected for Generations are either first generation artists who were born overseas, or artists who came from the same cultures but were born here in Australia, and to see how that experience of migration, that migrant experience, has travelled not only across distance but also across time. It's a social historical show and a contemporary art show, both dealing with the same subject matter. And I think because we identify the Illawarra with migrants, this is a really important exhibition to have here in Wollongong. And we're very fortunate to have some really prominent Australian artists, first generation and other generation, and to tell their stories. And I think it's a really powerful exhibition.
My name's Pamela Mei-Ling See. I'm a visual artist. I was born in Brisbane. My family is Chinese, although in terms of this show, which is all about the generations of Australians that we are, I guess that I'd be classified as second generation Australian, being born here. My parents migrated here, but also third generation Chinese. I arrived at paper cutting, and this is a contemporary form of Chinese paper cutting. This art form, paper cutting, exists in all over the world in different forms, but it started in China around 1500 years ago. The cutouts that I've done here are a little bit more westernized in that sense, because I wanted to do something that they sort of tap into that notion of that narrative of an illustration of a fairy tale. For instance, that everyone has access to a barbecue, so that's one of the artworks that we have on the end. There was somebody putting a snag on the Barbie, that you can have a dog as a pet, and you have your own patch of grass to mow your own lawn, and these are all sorts of things of which, when I have had the good fortune of travelling and meeting people from overseas, also other people from a similar background, other families who've settled here, have told me are reasons why they've come here.
I was born in Iran and immigrated to Australia in 1973. When I was asked to participate in this show and what was relevant to the exhibition, I decided in two specific works. One is behind me here, called The Runner, and the other one on my left, which is called Learning to Read. The Runner is about the idea of, runner is the name of a piece of carpet which you put in a corridor where you walk every day. It's kind of like a journey of life in a way. And then seeing the scale of that runner, I made 5 panels in red Australian sand and lotus leaves to show that these places I travel now are not covered with Persian carpets anymore. And that story of my Persianness or Iranianness is a little bit hidden, as you see in the carpet on the floor behind me in a roll. Means there are some stories that is not revealed all the time, but what you can see is my life on the wall here. I saw the void in the stairway way, and I proposed that we could show that work there because it's a very specific scale and the position of the work very important. So what this exhibition does, it not only looks at people who are migrated here, but people who may have been born here, but they brought into a family, let's say, that of that origin, and what kind of differences and influences they take. Like when you look at the work of Lee Salamone, he talks about what he learned about his culture from his grandmother here.
The work's pretty simple. I was raised, when I was a child, I was raised by my Italian grandparents in Adelaide, and they were true peasants, I suppose, true rural peasants, and we used to do a lot of things by the moon, and those activities have stayed with me, and I suppose I draw on a lot of those Italian peasant activities through my art practice. So we used to prune by the moon, we used to make wine by the moon, we used to plant by the moon, and these pieces are signposts that reference human activities based around the moon. The actual making of the piece is based on a Japanese term called wabi-sabi, where the piece itself is kind of the materials that are used, they have their own energy, and that sort of comes out. You know, migration just expands our knowledge of the world, and as Australia we are a migrating, or we're a family, I suppose, of migration.
My name's Mai. My surname's Nguyen Long, and I actually live in Bulai for the last year, but I was born in Tasmania. My dad's Vietnamese born, and my mum is Anglo-Irish descent. What I found really exciting about when John told me about the show, I understood it that I could respond very much from my personal experience. Well, I mean, I found that really a fantastic theme to respond to, but at the same time, obviously very problematic and layered. I have a particular relationship with Vietnam and my Vietnamese identity, and that's what I've addressed in my work. The way everyone experiences the world is quite messy, I suppose. You can see that in the drawings and in the blue drawings, watery drawings on the vase, black and blue ones. They relate to the installation as well. And everything ends up with a double meaning, like the net is actually a cricket net, but I've got it in there and there's a fish and stuff, so is it a cricket net or a fishing net kind of thing, or is it a grid? And then the scissors, which I've bound together to form stars or wreaths, it all comes from different stories.
For many of the new generation artists, they had to live between two cultures. They grew up between two cultures, the cultures of their parents and the culture in which they grew up in Australia.
My name's Nassim. I'm from Melbourne. I've been making short films and video pieces for quite some time now. Most of my stuff, I guess, has been at film festivals. So this is really exciting to have some work in a gallery. Last year I took a trip with my father to Iran, which is where he's from, and I had the idea, I wanted to make something while I was there. There's a few bits of video, but most of it is like high resolution stills that have been taken into After Effects and manipulated in sort of like a Photoshop. Yeah. This particular story is sort of from my imagination. When I was traveling around in Iran with my father, it was, I could feel that there was sort of a feeling of depression amongst sort of young people who I meet, and that sort of kind of influenced the type of story I wanted to tell. The work kind of explores my relationship to Iranian culture, which is half of my culture as well. Okay, well, I guess this show, it was great, because my father has some work in the show as well. So it's nice to be able to exhibit with him, and I guess that in itself is part of the theme of Generations, perhaps.
And for first generation people, it was that whole idea of coming to a new place, no language, that sense of loss, that dislocation, and then to assimilate. So these are stories which I think are really important to this area.
Tu verrai a valzare, Matilda, con me.